Chapter 5. Welcome to a night of tranquil rest. Find a position of perfect comfort and allow your body to become heavy and still. We have left the dark, imposing world of Transylvania behind. Our journey now takes us back to the gentle, familiar comforts of England, where the rhythm of life is calm and predictable. Allow yourself to be carried into the soft glow of lamplit rooms and the quiet intimacy of private thoughts. The world outside can wait. It is time to let go and sink into a deep, peaceful sleep. The first sound we hear is the soft, elegant scratch of a pen on paper, a delicate sound in a quiet room. It is the 9th of May, and Miss Mina Murray is writing a letter to her dearest friend, Miss Lucy Westenra. She sits at her small writing desk, the lingering light of twilight fading outside her window, replaced now by the soft, warm glow of a lamp. The 10 o'clock bell has just rung in the distance, a quiet, reassuring chime that marks the end of her day. Mina is an assistant schoolmistress, and she admits to feeling a little overwhelmed with work. The demands of her duties are sometimes trying, but her mind is a sanctuary filled with hope and purpose. She writes of her deep longing to be with Lucy, to be by the sea, where they can talk freely, just as they used to, and build their beautiful castles in the air. Her voice is soft and full of a quiet, steady purpose as she describes her diligent practice of shorthand and typewriting. She is not preparing for a career, but for a future life with Jonathan. She wants to be a true companion to him, a partner who can help with his work. She imagines their life together, a simple and profound existence of shared tasks and shared dreams. She will take down what he says and type it out for him. It is a peaceful, satisfying thought. She tells Lucy of a few hurried lines she has received from Jonathan from Transylvania. He is well and returning in about a week. The anticipation of his return, of hearing his tales of strange, distant lands, fills her with a soft, warm glow. She wonders if they will ever see those places together, hand in hand. The quiet ringing of the bell is her signal to stop, to put down her pen, and to rest with these peaceful thoughts of her future happiness. The narrative shifts, and we now hear from Lucy, her pen flowing with a lighter, more energetic hand. She writes from her home on Chatham Street on a Wednesday. Her letter begins with a playful protest, gently teasing Mina for her long delay in writing. She admits there is really nothing to interest Mina, and yet her words hold a hidden excitement. Town is very pleasant, she writes, and she spends her days with tranquil walks and peaceful rides in the park and visits to quiet picture galleries. She mentions Mr. Holmwood, Arthur, and a doctor she has met, a man with a resolute and yet calm demeanor and an immense lunatic asylum under his care. She describes his curious habit of looking her straight in the face, as if trying to read her thoughts. She finds it a wonderful and humbling study, and she confesses, with a gentle laugh, that it has given her more trouble than she could have ever imagined to understand her own feelings. But then, the tone of her letter becomes breathless, full of a deep and tender emotion she has kept secret for so long. She confesses everything. Mina, we have told all our secrets to each other since we were children. We have slept together and eaten together, and laughed and cried together. And now, though I have spoken, I would like to speak more. She whispers to herself, "Oh, Mina, couldn't you guess? I love him." The words are a quiet, joyful confession, a shy admission that makes her blush even as she writes them down. She loves him, she writes them down. She loves him, she writes. She loves him, she loves him. The repetition is like a soft, comforting song, a melody of pure, quiet happiness. She wishes she could be with Mina, sitting by the fire as they used to do, to try and put into words what she feels. The emotion is so pure, so deep, that she fears she might tear up the letter. She simply must share it, and she ends with a quiet plea for her own happiness. In her prayers, a request for a blessing on this new feeling that has blossomed in her heart. A few weeks pass, and it is now the 24th of May. Lucy writes again, her pen now a flurry of joyous feeling that she can barely contain. Her heart is overflowing with gratitude for Mina's sweet letter and her sympathy. She tells of a day she will never forget, a day of 3 proposals. She writes of it with a mix of joyous exhilaration and a gentle sorrow, for she feels truly sorry for 2 of the men whose hearts she had to break. Her own heart is so happy that she doesn't know what to do with herself, and yet it aches for the unhappiness she has caused. The first proposal came just before lunch. Dr. John Seward, the asylum doctor with the strong jaw and good forehead. She recalls his nervousness, the way he almost sat on his silk hat, and the way he played with a lancet, a nervous habit that she found both curious and endearing. He spoke to her with quiet sincerity, telling her how dear she was to him. When he saw her cry, he stopped himself, and with a great and noble dignity that was so like him, he simply asked if her heart was free. When she told him there was someone, he stood up, looking strong and very grave. He took her hands in his and told her he hoped she would be happy and that she could count him as one of her best friends. Lucy writes of the sadness she felt of seeing a good man walk away with a broken heart. She feels so miserable even though she is so happy, and she pauses her letter to gather her emotions. Later that same evening, after Arthur has left, Lucy continues her letter. She is in better spirits now and feels ready to tell of the other 2 proposals. Number 2 came after lunch. Mr. Quincy P. Morris, the nice American from Texas. He is so young and fresh, but has had so many adventures. He found her alone, as men often seem to do, and he sat down beside her, looking happy and jolly, but she could see his nervousness all the same. He took her hand in his, and his words were full of a charming American slang. He said so sweetly, "Miss Lucy, I know I ain't good enough to regulate the fixin's of your little shoes, but I guess if you wait till you find a man, that is you will go join them. 7 young women with the lamps when you quit. Won't you just hitch up alongside of me and let us go down the long road together, driving in double harness?" Lucy was touched by his playful sincerity. When she gently refused him, his expression grew serious. He praised her honesty and said that if she loved someone else, he would never trouble her again, but would be her faithful friend. She writes of how noble he was, so worthy of love. She burst into tears, and she admits to Mina that she wondered why a girl couldn't marry 3 men. It was a moment of true sadness and beauty. He then asked her, with a sorrowful look in his brave eyes, for a single kiss, to keep off the darkness now and then. It was such a noble gesture, so sweet to his rival, that she leaned over and kissed him. He stood up, his face full of quiet dignity, and left the room without a backward glance. Lucy confesses that she cried like a baby. She feels so upset, and she pauses, feeling she cannot write of her own happiness just yet. Then, a final postscript. She writes of the 3rd proposal of Arthur. She doesn't need to tell Mina about it, she says, because it was all so confused, so wonderfully quick. It seemed only a moment from his coming into the room until both his arms were around her and he was kissing her. Her heart is so very, very happy, and she feels so undeserving of it. She can only promise to try in the future to show her gratitude to God for all his goodness in sending her such a lover, such a husband, and such a friend. She ends her letter with a simple goodbye and a blessing. The narrative shifts again, and the steady, quiet hum of a phonograph fills the air. It is Dr. Seward recording his diary on the 25th of May. His voice is calm, but the words reveal a deep inner emptiness. He cannot eat, he cannot rest. A profound feeling of rejection and a lack of purpose has settled over him. To combat this, he turns to his work, to the study of his patients. He finds solace in the curious case of Renfield, a man he has been observing with a detached clinical interest. Seward's voice is slow and measured as he describes the patient's sanguine temperament and fixed idea. He questions him more fully, hoping to find a cure for his own empty feeling in the heart of another man's mystery. His thoughts are of cold scientific logic, a defense against the messy, painful emotions he is now feeling. He ponders on the nature of selfishness and duty, using his work as a shield against the chaos of his own heart. The phonograph hums on, capturing his cool intellectual observations as he tries to regain his balance. Finally, we have two short communications. First, a letter from Quincy P. Morris to Arthur Holmwood. The words are full of genuine, unselfish friendship. He speaks of their shared adventures, of telling yarns by campfires, and healing one another's wounds. Now he wants to invite Arthur and their old pal Jack Seward to mingle their weeps over the wine cup. He wants to drink a health with all his heart to the happiest man in the world, the man who has won the noblest heart. It is a beautiful, generous, and loving gesture from a man who has just had his own heart broken. Arthur's telegram in reply is brief but joyous. Count me in every time. I bear messages which will make both your ears tingle. The words are filled with the kind of boundless happiness that only true love can bring. Chapter 6. Blights brenn innetaste na one hoek. The date is the 24th of July, and we are hearing from Miss Mina Murray's journal. She has just arrived in Whitby, a beautiful old town on the coast. Lucy met her at the station, looking sweeter and lovelier than ever before, and they drove up to the house at the Crescent, where they have rooms. Mina describes the town, painting a picture in your mind's eye. The little river, the Esk, runs through a deep valley, which broadens out as it comes near the harbor. A great viaduct with high piers runs across the valley, and through its arches the view seems somehow further away than it really is, as though you are looking into a distant dream. The valley itself is a beautiful, vivid green, so steep that from the high ground on either side you can look right across it. The houses of the old town across the water are a soft red-roofed cluster, seemingly piled up, one over the other, like a picture from a storybook. Right over the town stands the noble ruin of Whitby Abbey, a place of immense size and romantic stories, where a legend says a white lady is sometimes seen in one of the windows. Between the abbey and the town lies another church, the parish one, surrounded by a large graveyard full of tombstones. Mina finds this to be the nicest spot in all of Whitby. It lies high above the town and offers a full view of the harbor and the great curve of the bay. The land here descends so steeply toward the harbor that part of the bank has fallen away, and some of the ancient gravestones hang precariously over the sandy pathway far below. There are quiet walks and comfortable seats throughout the churchyard, where people come to sit all day long, enjoying the beautiful view and the cool sea breeze. Mina sits here herself, her book on her knee, writing and listening to the low murmur of three old men sitting beside her. They seem to do nothing all day but sit and talk, and she is drawn into their world, into their stories. The harbor lies below her. On the far side, one long granite wall stretches out into the sea, with a lighthouse at its curved end. A heavy seawall runs along outside of it, a bulwark against the great cold sea. On the near side, the seawall makes a different crooked elbow, and its end also has a lighthouse. Between the two piers, a narrow opening leads into the harbor, which then suddenly widens. It is a beautiful sight at high water, But when the tide is out, the water recedes to almost nothing, and all that is left is the stream of the Esk, winding its way between banks of sand. Outside the harbor, a great reef rises for about half a mile, its sharp edge running straight out from behind the south lighthouse. At the very end of it, a buoy with a bell gently rocks in the tide, and in bad weather, it sends a mournful, solitary sound on the wind. A sound that the people here say is a legend of bells heard at sea when a ship is lost. Mina thinks of asking the old men about this, and just then, one of them begins to hobble her way. He is a funny old man, and his face is all gnarled and twisted like the bark of an ancient tree. He tells her he is nearly 100 years old and was a sailor in the Greenland fishing fleet when Waterloo was fought. He is a skeptical man, and when Mina asks him about the bells at sea and the White Lady at the Abbey, he dismisses them with a weary wave of his hand. "I wouldn't fash massel about them, miss. Them things be all wore out." He says they are just for cummers and trippers from York and Leeds, who would believe anything. Mina finds him a fascinating character and asks him to tell her something about the whale fishing in the old days. He is just settling himself to begin when the clock strikes 6, and he rises with a great effort, explaining he must get home for his tea, for it takes him time to climb the many steps up to his home. The steps are a great feature of the place, winding up in a delicate curve from the town to the church. They are so gentle that a horse could easily walk up and down them. Mina decides to go home too, as Lucy and her mother are likely back from their duty calls. A little time passes. It is now the 1st of August, and Mina has come back to the churchyard cliff with Lucy. The two friends had a most interesting talk with her old friend and his two companions. He is the Sir Oracle of the group, and Mina can see he must have been a most dictatorial person in his time. He will not admit anything, and if he cannot out-argue the others, he simply bullies them into silence. Lucy is looking sweetly pretty in her white lawn frock, her cheeks a lovely, healthy color from their time by the sea. The old men do not lose any time in coming up and sitting near her. She is so sweet with old people that they all fall in love with her on the spot. Even Mina's old man succumbs to her charm and does not contradict her, giving Mina double the share of his stubbornness instead. She gets him on the subject of local legends again, and he begins a sort of sermon. "It be all fool talk," he says. "Lock, stock, and barrel, that's what it be, and nowt else." He believes that all the legends, spirits, and warnings are just invented by parsons and book bodies to scare people. He goes on to say that even the tombstones are full of lies, full of pride, and that in nearly half of them, there aren't even any bodies at all. Mina is fascinated by his cynicism, but challenges him. He proves his point by telling a story of a gravestone for a master mariner who was murdered by pirates off the coast of Andres, and yet his bones likely lie at the bottom of the Greenland Sea. It is a grim, beautiful story, a part of the history of this old town. He tells them of another tombstone, which claims to be for a man who died in the hope of a glorious resurrection, but was in fact a suicide who hated his mother. The old man cackles with satisfaction, and Mina feels a gentle disquiet. Lucy turns the conversation, for it is her favorite seat, and she feels she cannot sit there now that she knows the stories of the tombstone. The old man leaves, and Mina and Lucy sit together for a while, taking in the beauty of the sea. Lucy tells her again about Arthur and their coming marriage, a story which makes Mina just a little heartsick, for she has not heard from Jonathan for a whole month. Later on the same day, Mina returns to the spot alone, for she is very sad. There was no letter for her, and she is worried something is the matter with Jonathan. The clock has just struck 9, and she watches the lights scattered all over the town, sometimes in rows where the streets are, and sometimes singly, the sound of sheep and lambs bleating in the fields behind her. and the clatter of a donkey's hoofs below mixes with the harsh waltz of the pier band and the singing of a Salvation Army meeting further along the quay. She is in a place where all of these sounds can be heard, but they do not mix. They exist side by side, separate and distinct. She wonders where Jonathan is, and if he is thinking of her, and she wishes he were there to sit beside her. Far away from the peaceful melancholy of Whitby, the scene shifts to Dr. Seward's diary, kept in a phonograph. It is now the 5th of June, and he speaks in a calm, clinical voice about his patient Renfield. He is a fascinating case, a man with highly developed selfishness, secrecy, and purpose. Seward wishes he could get to the object of Renfield's purpose. He seems to have a settled scheme of his own, but Seward cannot yet understand it. Renfield's redeeming quality, a love of animals, is strangely twisted, and Seward sometimes suspects he is abnormally cruel. For now, Renfield's hobby is catching flies. He has so many that Seward has to expostulate with him. To his surprise, the patient doesn't break out into a fury, but takes the matter with a serious thoughtfulness, asking for 3 days to clear them away. Seward agrees, determined to watch him. On the 18th of June, Renfield's hobby has moved on to spiders. He has several very big ones in a box, which he keeps feeding with his flies. The number of flies is diminishing, but he has been using half his food to attract more of them from outside. The madness is slowly, methodically progressing. By the 1st of July, the spiders are as much a nuisance as the flies, and Seward tells him he must get rid of them. Renfield agrees, but then disgusts Seward by catching a large blowfly, putting it in his mouth, and eating it, arguing that it was life, strong life, and gave life to him. This gives Seward a rudimentary idea, a theory about the man's madness. He notices Renfield keeps a notebook filled with masses of figures, as though he is focusing some account. A week later, on the 8th of July, Seward notes that his rudimentary idea is growing into a whole one. He kept away from Renfield for a few days to see if there were any changes. Renfield has gotten rid of some of his pets and has a new one, a sparrow. He is taming it by feeding it the remaining flies and spiders. On the 19th of July, Renfield has a whole colony of sparrows, and the flies and spiders are almost gone. He fawns on Seward like a dog, asking for a great favor, a kitten. Seward is not surprised by the request. As his theory is proving true, Renfield's pets are increasing in size and vivacity in a cumulative way. Seward, however, does not want the sparrows to be wiped out, so he tells Renfield he will see about it. A dangerous look comes over Renfield's face, a sudden, fierce, sidelong look that means killing. Seward realizes the man is a homicidal maniac, and he decides to test him with his craving to see how it will work out. Later that same day, at 10 o'clock at night, Seward visits Renfield again and finds him brooding in a corner. He throws himself on his knees, begging for a cat, saying his salvation depends on it. Seward is firm and tells him he cannot have it. Renfield goes without a word, sits down, and gnaws his fingers, a silent warning of danger. The next morning, the 20th of July, Seward visits Renfield early. He finds him up and humming a tune, cheerfully beginning his fly catching again. The birds are gone. Renfield says they have all flown away, but there are feathers about the room and a drop of blood on his pillow. Seward says nothing, but tells the keeper to watch him. At 11 o'clock that night, the attendant reports that Renfield has been very sick and has disgorged a lot of feathers. The attendant believes he ate his birds raw. Seward is troubled but also fascinated. He gives Renfield a strong opiate and takes his pocketbook. The theory that has been buzzing in his brain is now complete. He has to invent a new classification for Renfield, a zoophagus, or life-eating maniac. Renfield desires to absorb as many lives as he can in a cumulative way, giving many flies to one spider, many spiders to one bird, and then wanting a cat to eat the many birds. Seward wonders what the later steps would have been. He muses about the pursuit of science, about vivisection, and the knowledge of the brain. He questions if he too is of an exceptional brain, congenitally. Renfield's madness is a strange dark mirror of Seward's own scientific curiosity. Seward is left with a profound sense of melancholy, and his thoughts turn to Lucy. He cannot be angry with her or with his friend Arthur, but he must wait on, hopeless, and work. He wishes he had a strong, unselfish cause like his mad patient has to make his work worthwhile. The narrative shifts back to Mina's journal on the 26th of July. She is anxious, and she finds it soothing to express herself here, whispering to herself and listening at the same time. She is unhappy about Lucy and about Jonathan. She has not heard from Jonathan for some time, and she is very concerned. She has received a letter from him, but it is only a line dated from Castle Dracula, saying he is just starting for home. It is not like Jonathan, and it makes her uneasy. She also notes that Lucy has taken to her old habit of walking in her sleep. Her mother is worried about her, so they have decided that Mina is to lock their door every night. Lucy is to be married in the autumn and is already planning her dresses and her home. Mina sympathizes with her, for she does the same, though her life with Jonathan will start in a very simple way. Mr. Arthur Holmwood is coming soon as he can leave town, and Lucy is counting the moments until he arrives. She wants to take him to the seat on the churchyard cliff and show him the beauty of Whitby. Mina hopes that the waiting is what is disturbing her, and that she will be all right when he arrives. On the 27th of July, there is still no news from Jonathan, and Mina is getting quite uneasy about him. Lucy walks more than ever in her sleep, and Mina is starting to feel nervous and wakeful herself. Thankfully, Lucy's health is holding up, and she has lost her anemic look. Mr. Holmwood has been suddenly called away to see his father, who is seriously ill, and Lucy is fretting at the postponement. Mina prays that it will all last. Another week passes, and on the 3rd of August, there is still no news from Jonathan, not even to Mr. Hawkins. Mina looks at his last letter, but it does not satisfy her. It does not read like him, even though it is his writing. She feels a terrible suspense. Lucy has not walked much in her sleep the last week, but there is an odd concentration about her that Mina does not understand. Even in her sleep, she seems to be watching her, trying the door and searching for the key. On the 6th of August, the suspense is getting dreadful. A storm is brewing, and the sky is gray. The sun is hidden in thick clouds, and everything is gray, except for the green grass, which seems like emerald among it. The sea is tumbling in with a roar, muffled by the sea mists drifting inland. The horizon is lost in a gray mist, and the clouds are piled up like giant rocks. The air is filled with a brool over the sea, a sound that feels like a presage of doom. Mina sees dark figures on the beach, half shrouded in the mist. The fishing boats are racing for home, bending to the scuppers as they sweep into the harbor. Old Mr. Swales comes up to her, and she is touched by the change in the poor old man. He sits down beside her and gently takes her hand. He apologizes for all the wicked things he has been saying about the dead, and says he didn't mean them. He says old people don't like to think of death, and they make light of it to cheer up their own hearts. But he is not afraid of dying. He says life is just a waiting for something else, and death is all that we can rightly depend on. He feels his time is nigh, and he says there is something in the wind out over the sea that sounds and looks and tastes and smells like death. He raises his arms devoutly and moves his lips as though he is praying. He then gets up, shakes Mina's hand, and blesses her before hobbling off. The Coast Guard comes along and stops to talk to Mina. He keeps looking at a strange ship, a Russian ship that seems to be knocking about in the queerest way. She doesn't seem to know her mind and is steered strangely. The Coast Guard says we'll hear more of her before this time tomorrow. It is a final ominous note in the quiet gathering of the storm. Chapter 7. The winds of the storm are howling outside, but you are safe and warm. Our journey takes us to the seaside town of Whitby, where the peaceful calm of summer has been shattered by a sudden fierce tempest. Close your eyes and allow the sound of the wind and the roar of the waves to guide you into a deep and restful sleep. The date is the 8th of August, and we find ourselves reading an excerpt from a newspaper pasted into Mina Murray's journal. The correspondent from Whitby writes of one of the greatest and most sudden storms on record, with results that were both strange and unique. The day had started out beautiful and fair, a typical August day that drew many holidaymakers out to enjoy the surrounding countryside. The sun shone bright, and the weather was gentle and mild. But in the afternoon, a change came. Some of the locals who watched the weather from the high ground of the East Cliff churchyard noticed a sudden show of mare's tails, those high, thin clouds that signal a coming change. An old fisherman, who had watched the weather for more than half a century from that very spot, foretold the coming of a sudden storm with an emphatic certainty that settled in the hearts of those who heard him. As the sun began to set, the sky became a canvas of incredible beauty, a prelude to the coming storm. The great masses of clouds were splendidly colored in every sunset tint: flame, purple, pink, green, and violet. Interspersed among them were dark, perfectly outlined clouds, like colossal silhouettes. It was a sight of immeasurable grandeur. More than one sea captain, watching from the harbor below, decided that their boats would remain in the safety of the harbor until the storm had passed. The wind fell away completely as evening approached, and by midnight there was a dead calm. The air grew sultry, and the stillness was so marked that even the bleating of a sheep far inland or the bark of a dog in the town could be heard clearly. A band on the pier played a lively French air, but it sounded like a strange, jarring discord in the great harmony of nature's silence. The only sail to be seen was a foreign schooner with all sails set, seemingly drifting westward. People on shore, seeing her folly, tried to signal her to reduce sail, but she remained, a silent, painted ship upon a painted ocean. Then, a little after midnight, a strange, faint, hollow booming sound came from over the sea, and without any further warning, the tempest broke. With a rapidity that seemed impossible to comprehend, the whole of nature became convulsed. The waves rose in a growing fury, each one overtopping its fellow, until the glassy sea was a roaring, devouring monster. White-crested waves beat madly on the level sands and rushed up the shelving cliffs. Other waves broke over the piers, their spume sweeping the lanterns of the lighthouses at the end of each pier. The wind roared like thunder, and it blew with such force that even strong men had difficulty keeping their feet. It was a terrifying and magnificent spectacle. To add to the chaos, great masses of sea fog came drifting inland, white, wet clouds that swept by in a ghostly fashion. They were so damp and cold that it was easy to imagine they were the spirits of those lost at sea, touching their living brethren with the clammy hands of death. At times the mist would clear, and the sea could be seen in the glare of the lightning, which now came thick and fast, followed by such sudden peals of thunder that the whole sky seemed to tremble. In those brief, illuminated moments, scenes of grandeur were revealed. The sea, running mountains high, threw mighty masses of white foam skywards. A fishing boat, with a mere rag of sail, would rush madly for the shelter of the harbor. A new searchlight on the east cliff was brought into working order, and its brilliant beams swept the surface of the sea, guiding the fishing boats to safety. With each boat that reached the port, a shout of joy would rise from the people on shore, a shout that for a moment seemed to cleave the gale before being swept away in its rush. Suddenly, the searchlight discovered a schooner in the distance, with all sails still set. It was the same vessel that had been noticed earlier in the evening. A shudder ran through the watchers on the cliff as they realized the terrible danger she was in. She was being driven toward the great flat reef, and with the wind now blowing from the east, it seemed impossible for her to reach the harbor entrance. The schooner, with all her sails set, was rushing with such speed that, as one old salt put it, she must fetch up somewhere if it was only in hell. Then a greater rush of sea fog closed in on all things like a gray pall, leaving only the roar of the tempest and the crash of the thunder. The rays of the searchlight remained fixed on the harbor mouth, and the men waited, breathless. The wind shifted suddenly to the northeast, and the remnant of the sea fog melted in the blast. Then, as if by a miracle, the strange schooner swept between the piers, leaping from wave to wave at a headlong speed, and gained the safety of the harbor. The searchlight followed her, and a new shudder ran through all who saw her. For lashed to the helm was a corpse, with a drooping head that swung horribly to and fro with each motion of the ship. No other form could be seen on deck at all. A great awe settled upon everyone. The ship had found the harbor, unsteered save by the hand of a dead man. The schooner did not pause but rushed across the harbor and pitched herself onto a great pile of sand and gravel at the foot of the east cliff. The moment the vessel touched the shore, an immense dog sprang up from below deck as if shot by the concussion. It ran forward, jumped from the bow onto the sand, and disappeared into the darkness toward the churchyard cliff. A coast guard was the first to climb on board. When he reached the wheel, he recoiled in surprise and awe. He found the dead man fastened by his hands to a spoke of the wheel. A crucifix was held between his inner hand and the wood, and the rosary beads were tied around both wrists and the wheel. The cords with which he was tied had cut the flesh to the bone from the flapping of the sails. A doctor who came on board declared the man had been dead for 2 days. In his pocket was a bottle with a little roll of paper inside, which proved to be an addendum to the log. The captain's steadfastness was deemed as noble as that of the young Casabianca, and his body was reverently removed to the mortuary to await inquest. A sequel to the strange arrival of the derelict ship is almost more startling than the event itself. It turns out that the schooner is a Russian ship called the Demeter from Varna. She is almost entirely in ballast of silver sand, with only a small amount of cargo, a number of great wooden boxes filled with mold. This cargo was consigned to a Whitby solicitor, Mr. S.F. Billington. A good deal of interest was abroad concerning the dog which landed when the ship struck, but to the general disappointment, it was not to be found. It had disappeared entirely from the town, and some people looked with dread upon the possibility of it being a fierce and dangerous brute. Early that morning, a large dog belonging to a coal merchant close to the pier was found dead in the roadway. Its throat was torn away, and its belly was slit open as if with a savage claw. With the kind permission of a Board of Trade inspector, the logbook of the Demeter was examined. It was in order up to a few days prior, but it contained a strange narrative of missing men. The greatest interest, however, lay in the paper found in the bottle. It was a final desperate addendum from the captain. We now hear the words of the captain himself, recorded in the log of the Demeter from Varna to Whitby. The entries are brief at first, but full of growing dread. On the 6th of July, they finished taking in cargo of silver sand and boxes of earth. They set sail with 5 hands, 2 mates, a cook, and the captain. They sailed through the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles without issue, but by the 13th of July, the crew became dissatisfied and scared, crossing themselves, but refusing to speak out about their fears. A mate struck one of the men, but there was no quarrel. On the 16th of July, the first man, Petrofsky, went missing. He had been on the larboard watch and was relieved, but never went to his bunk. The men were more downcast than ever, saying they had expected something of the kind. On the 17th of July, a man named Olgarin came to the captain in an awestruck way, confiding that he thought there was a strange man aboard the ship, a tall, thin man who was not part of the crew. He had seen him come up the companionway and disappear. The captain, to allay the panic, ordered a search of the entire ship, but nothing was found. The men were relieved for a time, but the sense of unease remained. After 3 days of rough weather in the Bay of Biscay, the men seemed to have forgotten their dread, but on the 24th of July, another man disappeared. Like the first, he came off his watch and was never seen again. The men were now in a complete panic and asked for a double watch. The mate, however, was angry, fearing some violence would break out. For 4 days, they were in a living hell, knocking about in a sort of maelstrom with a fierce wind. No one could sleep. Then, on the 29th of July, another tragedy struck. The man on watch and the steersman were both missing. Now, they were without a second mate. The crew was in a panic, and the mate and captain agreed to go armed. On the 30th of July, both the man of watch and the steersman were missing. Only the captain, mate, and 2 hands were left. They seemed to be drifting toward some terrible doom. By the 3rd of August, the mate's reason had begun to give way. He came to the captain at the helm, his eyes wild and his face haggard, and whispered hoarsely that it was here. He said he had seen a tall, thin, ghastly, pale man on the bows the night before, and when he tried to stab it with his knife, the knife went right through it, empty as the air. He then went below to search the hold, determined to find the thing in one of the boxes. The captain, holding the helm, could not stop him. Just as he was beginning to hope that the mate would calm down, he heard a sudden, startled scream from the hatchway. The mate came up on deck, a raging madman, with his eyes rolling and his face convulsed with fear. "Save me! Save me!" he cried, and then in despair he said, "The sea will save me from him, and it is all that is left." He sprang onto the bulwark and deliberately threw himself into the sea. The captain was left alone, understanding the awful secret. He realized that this madman had gotten rid of the men one by one, and now he had followed them himself. On the 4th of August, still in the fog, the captain knew he had to do something. He was growing weaker, and he dared not leave the helm. He knew he had to die, but he would die like a man, like a sailor in blue water. He would tie his hands to the wheel, and along with them, he would tie the crucifix. He would save his soul and his honor as a captain. He was growing weaker, and he knew the end was coming. If the bottle were to be found, he hoped those who found it would understand that he had been true to his trust. He prayed to God and the Blessed Virgin and the saints to help a poor ignorant soul trying to do his duty. The funeral of the poor sea captain was held the next day, and it was a most touching sight. Every boat in the harbor seemed to be there, and the coffin was carried by captains all the way up the Esk and back to the Abbey steps. Mina and Lucy went to their old seat to watch the procession, and they had a lovely view. The poor fellow was laid to rest quite near their seat. Poor Lucy was very restless and uneasy all the time. Mina notes that her dreaming at night is telling on her, as she seems to be of too sensitive a nature to go through the world without trouble. An additional cause for their sadness was that poor old Mr. Swales was found dead that very morning on their favorite seat, his neck broken. He had evidently fallen back in some kind of fright, for there was a look of fear and horror on his face that made the men who found him shudder. Mina reflects that perhaps he had seen death with his dying eyes, and she feels a great sadness for the kind old man. A dog, which was always with its master, began to bark and howl during the service, refusing to come to him. Its eyes were savage, and its hair was bristling out like a cat's tail. Finally, the man, in a fit of anger, kicked the dog and threw it onto the tombstone where their seat was fixed. The moment it touched the stone, the poor thing became quiet and fell into a tremble, cowering in a pitiable state of terror. Lucy was full of pity for the dog, but she did not attempt to touch it. Mina is greatly afraid that Lucy's supersensitive nature will cause her much trouble. The whole series of events, the ship steered into port by a dead man, the touching funeral, and the dog's strange behavior will all give her material for her dreams. Mina decides it will be best for Lucy to be tired out physically, so she plans to take her for a long walk by the cliffs to Robin Hood's Bay and back. Hopefully she won't have much inclination for sleepwalking then. Chapter 8. Mina feels a profound weariness, the kind that comes after a long, active day. If it weren't for her diary being a duty, she would not open it. She and Lucy had a lovely walk, she says. After a while, Lucy's spirits lifted, thanks to some curious cows who came nosing toward them in a field near the lighthouse, frightening the wits out of them. In that moment of shared light-hearted fear, all their worries seemed to wipe away, a slate cleaned for a fresh start. They had a capital severe tea at a sweet old-fashioned inn in Robin Hood's Bay, its bow window resting right over the seaweed-covered rocks of the strand. Their appetites were hearty, and their walk home was filled with many little stoppages to rest. Back home, they had a small fight with the young curate, who came to supper. A man who Mina muses was not yet wise enough to know when young girls are truly tired. Now, however, all is quiet. Lucy is asleep and breathing softly. Her cheeks have more color than usual, and she looks so sweet, so lovely in her sleep. Mina feels a deep happiness because dear Lucy seems better, as if they have truly turned a corner, and her troubles with dreaming are over. Mina would be completely happy if she only knew if Jonathan. She closes her thought with a quiet prayer for him. Then, a sudden change. It is now the 11th of August, 3 o'clock in the morning. Mina is awake again, too agitated to sleep. She had fallen asleep as soon as she closed her diary, but then, with a horrible sense of fear, she woke up completely. She felt an unsettling emptiness in the dark room. The room was dark, so she crept across and felt for Lucy's bed. It was empty. She lit a match and saw that Lucy was not in the room. The door was shut, but not locked, as Mina had left it. Fearing to wake Lucy's mother, who has been ill lately, Mina threw on some clothes and began to search for her. She ran downstairs, her heart chilling with an ever-growing fear. Finally, she found the hall door open, its catch not caught. The people of the house were careful to lock the door every night, so Mina feared Lucy must have gone out just as she was, in her night dress. A vague, overmastering fear obscured all other thoughts. Taking a big, heavy shawl, she ran out into the night. The clock was striking 1. The bright full moon, with its heavy, driving black clouds, cast the whole scene into a fleeting diorama of light and shade. Mina looked across the harbor to the east cliff, toward their favorite seat. For a moment, a cloud's shadow obscured the old church and graveyard. Then, as the cloud passed, a narrow band of light, sharp as a sword cut, moved across the scene. And there, on their favorite seat, the silver light of the moon struck a half-reclining figure, snowy white. Another cloud was too quick for her to see much, but it seemed as though something dark stood behind the seat, bending over the white figure. She could not tell what it was, whether man or beast. She did not wait for another glance, but flew down the steep steps to the pier and ran along by the fish market to the bridge, the only way to reach the east cliff. The town seemed dead, not a soul in sight. She was glad of this, for she wanted no witness to poor Lucy's condition. The time and distance seemed endless. Her knees trembled, and her breath came in great labored gasps as she toiled up the hundreds of steps to the abbey. When she got near the top, she could see the seat and the white figure, for she was now close enough to distinguish it, even through the spells of shadow. There was undoubtedly something long and black bending over the half-reclining white figure. Mina cried out in fright, "Lucy, Lucy," and something raised a head. From where she was, she could see a white face and red, gleaming eyes. Lucy did not answer. When Mina finally came into full view again, the cloud had passed, and the moonlight struck so brilliantly that she could see Lucy lying alone, her head resting over the back of the seat. She was completely alone, and there was no sign of any living thing. Mina bent over her and saw that she was still asleep. Her lips were parted, and she was breathing, not softly as usual, but in long, heavy gasps, as though striving to get her lungs full at every breath. As Mina came close, Lucy put up her hand in her sleep and pulled the collar of her nightdress close around her throat. A little shudder went through her, as though she felt the cold. Mina flung the warm shawl over her and drew the edges tight around her neck, dreading a deadly chill from the night air. She fastened the shawl with a big safety pin to have her hands free, but in her anxiety, she must have been clumsy and pinched or pricked her. When Lucy's breathing became quieter, she put her hand to her throat again and moaned in her sleep. Mina then began to gently wake her. Lucy opened her eyes and awoke, but she did not seem surprised to see Mina, as she did not at once realize where she was. She trembled a little and clung to Mina, and when told to come home, she rose without a word, with the obedience of a child. Fortune favored them, and they got home without meeting a soul. Once inside, they washed their feet and said a prayer of thankfulness together. Before falling asleep, Lucy implored Mina not to tell anyone, not even her mother, about her sleepwalking. Mina promised, hoping she did the right thing. She then locked the door and tied the key to her wrist. Lucy slept soundly, and the first reflex of the dawn was high over the sea. The next day, all seems well. The adventure of the night does not seem to have harmed Lucy. On the contrary, it seems to have benefited her, for she looks better this morning than she has for weeks. Mina notices that her clumsiness with the safety pin hurt her. The skin of her throat was pierced, leaving 2 tiny red points like pinpricks, and a small drop of blood was on her nightdress. Mina feels sorry, but Lucy laughs it off, saying she didn't even feel it. For a few days, a quiet rhythm returns. They pass a happy day, taking lunch in Mulgrave Woods. Mina feels a little sad, thinking of how happy it would be if Jonathan were with her. Lucy seems more restful than she has been for some time. On the 12th of August, Mina is wakened twice by Lucy trying to get out, but she returns to bed under a sort of protest. On the 13th, she wakes to find Lucy sitting up, still asleep, pointing to the window. Mina looks out and sees a great bat flitting in whirling circles against the brilliant moonlight. When she returns from the window, Lucy is sleeping peacefully. On the 14th of August, Lucy makes a funny remark as they watch the sunset over the West Pier. the red light is thrown over the old abbey, and suddenly Lucy murmurs as if to herself, "His red eyes again. They are just the same." Mina is startled. She looks at Lucy, who is in a half-dreamy state, and follows her eyes to their seat on the east cliff. A dark figure is seated alone. Mina is startled for a moment, seeing the stranger with great eyes like burning flames, but then the illusion is dispelled. The red sunlight is shining on the windows of St. Mary's Church, and a change in the light makes it appear as if the light is moving. Mina points this out to Lucy, who comes to with a start. That night, Mina goes for a stroll alone, and upon returning, looks up at their window. She sees Lucy's head leaning out, eyes shut and fast asleep. Seated beside her on the windowsill is something that looks like a good-sized bird. Mina, afraid she might get a chill, runs upstairs. She finds Lucy moving back to her bed, still asleep and breathing heavily, holding her hand to her throat as if to protect it from the cold. Lucy is paler than is her wont, with a drawn, haggard look under her eyes. On the 15th of August, they receive happy news at breakfast. Arthur's father is better, and he wants the marriage to happen soon. Lucy is filled with quiet joy. Her mother is glad but also sad, and confides in Mina that her own doctor has given her a death warrant. Her heart is weakening, and a sudden shock could kill her at any time. Mina feels they were wise to keep the terrible story of Lucy's sleepwalking from her. A shadowy pall seems to be coming over their happiness. For 2 days, Mina has not had the heart to write. Lucy seems to be growing weaker, while her mother's hours are numbering to a close. Mina is baffled by Lucy's fading away. She eats well and sleeps well, yet she is becoming more languid day by day. At night, Mina hears her gasping for air. Mina keeps the key of their door fastened to her wrist, but Lucy still gets up and walks about the room, sitting at the open window. One night, she found Lucy leaning out and was unable to wake her. She had fallen into a faint. When Mina restored her, she was as weak as water and cried silently, struggling for breath. Mina notices that the tiny wounds on her throat do not seem to have healed. They are still open, and their edges are faintly white, like little white dots with red centers. Mina decides she must insist on a doctor seeing them within a day or two. A brief, detached voice from a business letter breaks into the narrative. The firm of Samuel F. Billington and Son, solicitors of Whitby, has arranged for the delivery of 50 boxes of earth to a partially ruined building at a place called Carfax, near Purfleet. The letters are formal, with instructions for the keys and payment. The boxes are on their way. On the 18th of August, Mina is happy and sits on her favorite seat in the churchyard. Lucy is much better, and the roses seem to be coming back to her cheeks. She is in gay spirits and has reminded Mina of that night. She taps playfully on the stone slab with her boot and says, "My poor little feet didn't make much noise then. I dare say poor old Mr. Swales would have told me that it was because I didn't want to wake up Geordie." In this communicative mood, Mina asks her if she dreamed that night. Lucy gets a sweet, puckered look on her forehead. She describes a half-dream where she felt drawn to this spot, though she was afraid. She remembers passing through the streets, hearing dogs howling and a fish leaping. Then, she has a vague memory of something long and dark with red eyes, just like in the sunset, and something very sweet and very bitter all around her at once. She felt as though she were sinking into deep green water and heard a singing in her ears. Her soul seemed to go out from her body and float about the air, and she recalls the West Lighthouse being right under her. Then came a sort of agonizing feeling, as if she were in an earthquake, and she came back to find Mina shaking her body. She saw Mina do it before she felt it. She then began to laugh, and Mina, finding it a little uncanny, quickly changed the subject. Lucy became her old self again. On the 19th of August, Mina writes with a feeling of great joy, though with a tinge of sadness. She has finally received news of Jonathan. He has been ill, which is why he hasn't written. Mr. Hawkins sent her a letter from his sister Agatha at the Hospital of St. Joseph and Stay Mary in Budapest. Jonathan has been under their care for nearly 6 weeks, suffering from a violent brain fever. He is progressing well and will need a few weeks' rest before returning. Mina is to leave in the morning to go to him and help nurse him. Mr. Hawkins suggests they get married out there. Mina cries over the good sister's letter, which she keeps close to her heart. Sister Agatha's letter reveals that Jonathan had a fearful shock, and in his delirium had dreadful ravings of wolves and poison and blood, of ghosts and demons. She warns Mina to be careful not to excite him with such things. The letter ends with a prayer for their many happy years together. Now we return to the diary of Dr. Seward. The date is the 19th of August. He records a strange and sudden change in Renfield. Renfield begins to get excited, sniffing about like a dog. To the attendant, he becomes quite haughty, saying, "I don't want to talk to you. You don't count now. The master is at hand." To Dr. Seward, Renfield's attitude is the same. He thinks it might be a sudden form of religious mania. Renfield, however, will not talk about his pets. He responds enigmatically, saying, "The bridemaidens rejoice the eyes that wait the coming of the bride. But when the bride draweth nigh, then the maidens shine not to the eyes that are filled." He then remains obstinately seated on his bed. Later that night, the night watchman comes to Dr. Seward to say that Renfield has escaped. Dr. Seward throws on his clothes and runs down. The attendant tells him he saw Renfield's feet disappear through the window. He was only in his night gear, so he can't be far. Dr. Seward, being thin, gets out through the window with the attendant's help. He sees a white figure scale the high wall that separates their grounds from those of the deserted house, Carfax. Dr. Seward, being thin, gets out through the window with the attendant's help. He sees a white figure scale the high wall that separates their grounds from those of the deserted house, Carfax. Dr. Seward throws on his clothes and runs down. The attendant tells him he saw Renfield's feet. Dr. Seward, a central, being thin, comes. Seward runs back to get men and a ladder and then crosses the wall himself. He finds Renfield pressed close against the old iron-bound oak door of the chapel, talking to someone. He is afraid to go too close, but he can hear him say, "I am here to do your bidding, master. I am your slave, and you will reward me, for I shall be faithful. I have worshipped you long and afar off. Now that you are near, I await your command." The night air is still. The wind has died down. The moon shines on the silent figure of the madman. Let the sound of his whispered words fade into the quiet of the night. Let the mysteries of Whitby and the coming darkness settle gently in your mind. Drift now into a peaceful and tranquil sleep.